What happens when privilege writes a check that reality can't cash? On Apex Air Flight 718, a 17-year-old boy, sitting quietly in his first-class seat, is about to find out. He'll be targeted, accused, and publicly humiliated, thrown off the plane for a crime that existed only in the mind of the woman sitting next to him. But she made one catastrophic mistake. Can you guess what it was? She never imagined who was on the other end of the boy's one phone call. In 5 minutes, her world, and everyone on that plane, will come to a grinding halt. Because when the CEO calls, you don't just listen, you ground the plane. This is the story of how a quiet injustice erupted into a storm of hard, swift karma, brought to you by Dark Stories. The air in the flagship lounge at John F. Kennedy International Airport had a specific scent, a blend of expensive leather, brewed coffee, and the faint, clean aroma of jet fuel that promised distant horizons. For 17-year-old Jordan Vance, it was the smell of opportunity. He wasn't a jaded traveler. This was only his second time flying first class, and the novelty hadn't worn off. Dressed in dark, well-fitting jeans, a simple but clearly high-quality gray hoodie, and a pair of crisp off-white sneakers, he looked more like a rising musician or a tech prodigy than the son of a Fortune 500 CEO. That was exactly how he liked it. He sat by the vast window, sketching in a Moleskine notebook. He wasn't doodling. He was refining a concept for a cantilevered chair, the physics of which he was struggling to balance with a sleek aesthetic. Design was his passion, the language he shared with his father, Marcus Vance. This trip was a gift from his dad, a ticket to the prestigious London Design Festival, a chance to see the masters, and maybe, just maybe, get some inspiration for his portfolio for the Pratt Institute. What would you do if your dream trip was suddenly ripped away? Stay tuned to Dark Stories to find out how this unfolds. His boarding pass, tucked into his notebook, read, Vance, J, Seat 2B, First Class. A thrill still shot through him when he saw it. He'd earned this trip with a stellar academic year, and the first-class ticket was his father's way of saying, I see you, son. I'm proud of you. Now boarding Apex Air Flight 718 to London Heathrow, first-class passengers, military personnel, and families with small children. Jordan packed his notebook, slid his Bose headphones around his neck, and joined the short, privileged line. He handed his passport and boarding pass to the gate agent, who gave him a professional, if slightly tired, smile. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Vance. Stepping onto the plane was like entering another world. The lighting was soft, the carpets were plush, and the scent of warm nuts and champagne was already in the air. He found his seat, 2B, a spacious pod with its own minibar, a large entertainment screen, and more legroom than his entire bedroom. He stowed his backpack in the overhead compartment, slid into the buttery leather seat, and exhaled. This was it. 7 hours of peace to sketch, watch movies, and anticipate London. That peace was shattered by a sharp, saccharine voice. Excuse me. I think you might be in the wrong cabin. Jordan looked up. A woman, probably in her late 50s, stood in the aisle, clutching a Louis Vuitton tote bag like a shield. She was immaculately dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit. Her blonde hair, coiffed into a helmet of perfection. Her smile was a masterpiece of condescension. Jordan glanced at his boarding pass and then back at her. Seat 2B. I think I'm in the right place. Oh, the woman said, her smile tightening. It's just that, well, sometimes people get turned around. The economy cabin is toward the back of the plane. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. People like you don't belong here. Jordan felt a familiar heat rise in his cheeks, but he pushed it down. His father had taught him that composure was a superpower. I'm sure you're just trying to be helpful, he said, his voice even. But this is my seat. The woman, who had the aisle seat 2D, huffed and began arranging her own belongings, making a show of placing her expensive tote in the footwell. She flagged down a flight attendant, a woman with a name tag that read Brenda. Brenda, dear, she began in a stage whisper loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Could you perhaps double-check this young man's ticket? He seems a little confused. I just feel safer knowing everyone in first class is supposed to be here. Brenda, harried and clearly intimidated by the woman's expensive aura, approached Jordan with an apologetic wince. Sir, I'm so sorry, But could I just see your boarding pass? Jordan's jaw tightened. He was being audited. He pulled out his pass and handed it to her. Brenda glanced at it, then back at the woman. He's in the right seat, ma'am. Seat 2B. Well, I never, the woman muttered, settling into her seat. She looked Jordan up and down, her eyes lingering on his sneakers. It's amazing what they let people get away with these days. Probably used his mother's air miles. Jordan put on his headphones, turning up the volume on a playlist of instrumental hip-hop. He opened his notebook, but the lines of his chair sketch now looked jagged and angry. He tried to ignore her, to lose himself in the world of design, but he could feel her gaze on him, a palpable weight of judgment. He was an exhibit, the anomaly in her pristine cream-colored world. He ordered a ginger ale when Brenda came by, while the woman, who introduced herself to the attendant as Caroline Finch, ordered a glass of Chardonnay. Nothing too oaky, Brenda. I can't abide a cheap Chardonnay. As the cabin door was about to close, Caroline Finch suddenly gasped. She patted her seat, her tote bag, and then looked around with wide, panicked eyes. My wallet, she announced, her voice rising in panic. It's gone. It was right here in my tote bag. She didn't look around the cabin. She didn't look in her own seat cushions. She looked directly at one person. She looked at Jordan. You, she said, her voice dripping with accusation. While I was talking to Brenda, you were the only one near my bag. The quiet hum of the first-class cabin died instantly. Every eye turned to them. Jordan felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't just a microaggression anymore. This was a full-blown, baseless accusation. Ma'am, I haven't touched your bag, Jordan said, his voice low and steady, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. Oh, please, Caroline scoffed. I saw you eyeing my things the moment you sat down. You probably thought you could snatch it and no one would notice. I want my wallet back. Brenda, the flight attendant, rushed over, her face pale. Ma'am, let's not jump to conclusions. Let's look for it. I know where to look, Caroline shot back, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Jordan. Search him. Search his bag. He took it. I demand you do something before this plane takes off and he gets away with it. The accusation hung in the air, a poison that had already infected the entire cabin. He was no longer Jordan Vance, aspiring designer. He was the young black teenager in the hoodie, the presumed thief in first class, and his journey to London had just taken a very, very dark turn. Will justice prevail? Keep watching Dark Stories to see how this unfolds. The accusation, once spoken, could not be taken back. It echoed in the stunned silence of the cabin. Jordan felt a dozen pairs of eyes on him, a mixture of suspicion, pity, and cold indifference. He was a specimen under glass. Ma'am, I can assure you I did not touch your wallet, Jordan repeated, his voice dangerously calm. He was channeling his father's boardroom demeanor, a placid surface over a churning volcano of fury and humiliation. Brenda, the flight attendant, was caught in the crossfire. On one hand, she had airline protocol. On the other, she had Caroline Finch, a woman who radiated the kind of entitlement that could end careers with a single well-placed complaint letter. Brenda chose the path of least resistance. Sir, she said, turning to Jordan, her tone pleading. Maybe if you just showed us there's nothing in your pockets or your bag, we can clear this all up. Jordan's blood ran cold. You want to search me? Based on her word with no evidence at all? It's not a search, Brenda said, twisting her hands. It's just a verification to put the lady's mind at ease. Her mind at ease? Jordan's voice rose, a crack in his carefully constructed calm. She just accused me of being a thief in front of everyone. This isn't about her mind. It's about her prejudice. Caroline Finch gasped theatrically. Oh, so now you're playing that card. I knew it. First you steal from me, and now you're trying to make this about race. How dare you? I want the captain now. The situation was spiraling out of control. Brenda, looking utterly overwhelmed, spoke into the cabin intercom. Purser to first class, please. A senior flight attendant, a man named Michael with a stern face and years of experience in his eyes, arrived. Caroline immediately launched into her story, embellishing it with every telling. He was hovering, I tell you. He has shifty eyes. My wallet contained over $500 in cash and all my credit cards. I am a victim here. Michael looked from the hysterical Caroline to the stone-faced Jordan. He knelt by Caroline's seat. Ma'am, have you checked inside your tote bag, under the liner, or perhaps in the seat pocket in front of you? I am not an idiot, she snapped. It's gone, and he's the one who took it. Michael sighed and turned to Jordan. His expression was more professional, less panicked than Brenda's, but the underlying message was the same. The machine was moving, and Jordan was caught in its gears. Sir, we have a serious accusation here. Before we take off, we need to resolve it. Airport security will need to be involved. So, call them, Jordan said, his voice flat. Call the Port Authority police. Let them come and do a proper investigation. But you are not going to pat me down like a common criminal based on her fantasy. This was the wrong thing to say. It sounded like a challenge. Brenda, standing behind Michael, whispered, he's being uncooperative. He's getting aggressive. The words were poison, uncooperative, aggressive, the classic labels used to justify injustice. At that moment, the cockpit door opened, and the captain emerged. Captain Miller was a man in his late 50s with a neat gray mustache and an air of absolute authority. He surveyed the scene. What's the issue here? He asked, his voice a low baritone that cut through the tension. Caroline Finch retold her story for the third time, her voice quivering with faux vulnerability. Captain, I am being robbed and threatened. I don't feel safe with this person on the plane. Captain Miller listened patiently, his eyes fixed on Jordan. He saw a young black man in a hoodie and expensive sneakers. He saw a hysterical, wealthy-looking woman. He made a calculation, a risk assessment based on years of experience and, unfortunately, years of ingrained societal bias. Son, the captain said to Jordan, his tone leaving no room for argument. I can't have a security situation on my aircraft. If a passenger feels unsafe, I have to take it seriously. We can either sort this out here and now, or I'll have to ask you to deplane. Sort it out how? Jordan challenged. By me admitting to something I didn't do? By letting you search me in front of all these people? I've done nothing wrong. Then you'll have no problem gathering your belongings and stepping off the plane to speak with ground security, the captain stated. It wasn't a request. Humiliation washed over Jordan in a hot, sickening wave. He was being kicked off the plane. He looked around the cabin. No one met his eye. They were all staring at their phones, their books, the ceiling, anywhere but at him, except for one person. A woman in seat 3A, a sharp-looking brunette in a business suit, was watching the entire exchange with a look of intense disapproval. But she said nothing. Defeated, Jordan stood up. The silence was deafening. He reached into the overhead bin and pulled down his backpack. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a profound, soul-crushing rage. He walked down the aisle, the walk of shame, feeling every stare like a physical blow. Brenda stood by the door, refusing to meet his gaze. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, the cold, sterile air a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere of the cabin, he turned back one last time. He saw Caroline Finch, her face a mask of smug victory, accepting a topped-up glass of Chardonnay from a relieved Brenda. She had one. The cabin door clicked shut behind him, sealing him off. He was alone on the jet bridge, a gate agent waiting at the inn to escort him to the terminal. The engines of the massive Airbus A350 began to whine, preparing for pushback. The injustice was absolute. They were going to fly away and leave him here, branded a thief. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His hands were still trembling, but he forced his fingers to be steady. He scrolled to his favorites and pressed the first name, Dad. His father picked up on the second ring. Hey, son. You should be taking off soon. Everything all right? Jordan took a deep, shuddering breath, the carefully constructed dam of his composure finally breaking. "Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They kicked me off the plane." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then his father's voice, when it came back, was different. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold, sharp, and incredibly dangerous. "Who did?" "The flight crew. A woman accused me of stealing her wallet." "Did you?" "No, Dad. Of course not." Another pause. Jordan could almost hear the gears turning in his father's mind, the CEO brain activating, processing data, assessing the situation, formulating a strategy. "What is the flight number?" Marcus Vance asked, his voice now devoid of any emotion. It was the voice he used when a multi-billion-dollar deal was about to collapse. "Apex Air 718 to Heathrow." "And you are on the jet bridge right now?" "Yes, they're about to push back." "They are not," his father said with chilling certainty. "Stay exactly where you are. Do not move. Give me 5 minutes." The line went dead. Jordan stood there on the jet bridge, the roar of the engines in his ears, clutching his phone. 5 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. He had no idea what his father could possibly do. From his vantage point, the plane was a sealed fortress of injustice, already moving on without him. He was powerless. He was wrong. His father was not. And the plane wasn't going anywhere. How does a single phone call stop an airplane? Stay with Dark Stories to witness the incredible power shift. Marcus Vance sat in his office on the 58th floor of the Orosphere Dynamics Tower in Manhattan. The view from his window was a breathtaking panorama of the city, a testament to the empire he had built. Orosphere was a global leader in advanced materials and industrial design, a titan of innovation whose technology was in everything from satellites to surgical tools. But at that moment, the view meant nothing to him. His world had shrunk to the voice of his son, laced with a pain and humiliation that cut him deeper than any corporate failure ever could. 5 minutes. That's what he had promised. He didn't panic. He didn't yell. Marcus Vance moved with the chilling precision of a grandmaster in chess. His first call wasn't to Apex Air's customer service hotline. That was for civilians. He tapped a name on his private contact list, Robert Chen, EVP of North American Operations, Apex Air. Chen was a man Marcus had negotiated with, had dinner with, had played golf with. He was a man who understood the language of power and money. The phone rang twice. "Marcus, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Robert's voice was jovial. "Rob," Marcus said, his voice a blade of ice. "I have a situation. My son, Jordan Vance, was just removed from your Flight 718, JFK to Heathrow. He's standing on the jet bridge as we speak." There was a pause. The joviality vanished from Robert's voice. "Removed? What for?" "A baseless accusation of theft from another passenger. Your crew, specifically a flight attendant named Brenda and a Captain Miller, chose to humiliate and deplane my 17-year-old son rather than conduct a professional inquiry. He was presumed guilty on sight." Marcus let the words hang in the air. He didn't need to mention race. Robert Chen was smart enough to read between the lines. "Marcus, I'm terribly sorry to hear that. Let me look into it immediately. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding we can clear up." "A misunderstanding?" Marcus's voice dropped even lower. "Rob, your plane is about to push back from the gate. My son is being left behind. That is not a misunderstanding. That is an operational decision, and it's a bad one. I'll make some calls, Marcus. We'll get him on the next flight, of course. Upgrade him. My sincerest apologies." "Stop," Marcus commanded. The word was so sharp it made Robert flinch miles away. "You're not hearing me. My son is not getting on the next flight. He is getting back on that flight, in his seat, and he is owed an apology from the captain himself. Orosphere Dynamics spends over $8 million a year with your airline, Rob. We have a 3-year exclusive corporate contract that's up for renewal in October. I am one phone call away from moving our entire global travel portfolio to Delta. The threat was colossal. 8 million a year was one thing. The loss of a flagship corporate client like Orosphere would be a catastrophic failure for Robert's division, a black mark on his career he would never recover from. "Marcus, please," Robert stammered. "There are no pleases, Rob. There is only this," Marcus said, his voice like granite. "You have 60 seconds to call the tower at JFK in ground flight 718. Not delay it. Ground it. Halt all pushback procedures. If that plane moves another inch away from the gate, our contract is terminated. Not for review. Terminated as of right now, and you can explain to your board why." Silence. On the other end of the line, Robert Chen was sweating, his mind racing through the corporate and logistical nightmare that was unfolding. Grounding a fully boarded international flight that was ready for departure was almost unheard of. It would cost the airline hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel, landing slot fees, and passenger compensation. It was a logistical apocalypse. But losing the Orosphere contract would cost them millions. "Consider it done," Robert said, his voice tight with stress. Marcus wasn't finished. "One more thing, Rob. The passenger who made the false accusation. Her name is Caroline Finch. I want her removed from the plane. And I want the Port Authority police to meet her at the gate. A false police report, slander, and harassment are crimes. I expect Apex Air to be a cooperative witness when my legal team follows up." "My God, Marcus." "My God is right," Marcus said. "You had a choice between protecting a prejudiced fool and a paying customer who was the son of your largest corporate partner. Your crew chose poorly. Now you get to fix it. Your 60 seconds started 45 seconds ago." He hung up the phone. He leaned back in his chair, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. The CEO was gone. Now he was just a father, waiting. On board Flight 718, the fasten seatbelt sign was illuminated. The captain's voice came over the PA at cabin crew, "Prepare for pushback." Caroline Finch sipped her Chardonnay, a triumphant smirk on her face. She had cleansed her environment. She had restored order. In the seat across the aisle, Sarah, the brunette journalist, watched her with unveiled disgust before pointedly opening her laptop. The plane gave a slight lurch, then stopped. The low whine of the engine spooled down, replaced by a confused silence. Passengers exchanged puzzled glances. A delay now? After 5 minutes of dead silence, the captain's voice came back on the PA. This time, it had lost its authoritative swagger. It was tight, strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have been instructed by airport control to hold our position. We are not cleared for takeoff at this time. There has been a development. Please remain in your seats. I will update you when I have more information." A ripple of groans and complaints went through the cabin. Caroline Finch looked annoyed. "For heaven's sake," she muttered. "Probably some union issue." But then something highly unusual happened. The jet bridge, which had started to retract, slowly moved back into position against the aircraft door. A heavy thump echoed through the cabin as it reconnected. The cabin door was opened from the outside. Standing there were not one, but 3 figures. The first was the gate agent who had escorted Jordan off. The second was a man in a sharp suit, whom the crew would later learn was the Apex Air JFK station manager. The third was Jordan Vance. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, standing at the top of the jet bridge, were 2 Port Authority police officers. Jordan stepped back onto the plane. His face was unreadable. He didn't look triumphant or angry. He just looked resolute. He walked past the stunned flight attendants, past the bewildered passengers, and stood in the aisle next to seat 2B. The station manager, his face grim, walked directly up to Captain Miller, who had emerged from the cockpit looking pale and confused. "Captain, I need a word in private," he gestured to the galley. As they spoke in hushed, urgent tones, the purser, Michael, approached Caroline Finch. His face was a mask of cold professionalism. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but clear. "There seems to have been a grave misunderstanding regarding your wallet." Caroline scoffed. "There's no misunderstanding. That boy." "Your wallet has been located, ma'am," Michael interrupted, cutting her off. He reached into the side pocket of her own Louis Vuitton tote bag, the one she had clutched so protectively, and pulled out a slim, cream-colored wallet. He held it up for her to see. It appears it had slipped into the side lining. The blood drained from Caroline Finch's face. She stared at the wallet as if it were a snake. The silence in the cabin was now absolute, thick with a tension you could taste. Every passenger was watching, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. I must have," she stammered, her voice a pathetic whisper. "Yes," Michael said, his eyes like chips of ice. "You must have. Miss Finch, on behalf of the captain, I am going to have to ask you to gather your belongings. You will be deplaning." "Deplaning?" she shrieked. "But it was a mistake. An honest mistake." "An honest mistake," a new voice said, "doesn't involve grounding a transatlantic flight." All eyes turned to Jordan. He stood there, no longer a boy, but the focal point of a storm he hadn't started, but would most certainly see finished. The power dynamic in the cabin had not just shifted, it had been seismically inverted. The plane wasn't just grounded. For Caroline Finch and the crew of Flight 718, the world had just been turned upside down. Want to know how this ends? Stay with Dark Stories for the explosive conclusion. The first-class cabin of Apex Air Flight 718 had transformed from a sanctuary of privilege into a courtroom. Caroline Finch was the defendant, Michael the purser was the prosecutor, and every other passenger was the jury. The verdict was written on their faces, a mixture of shock, dawning comprehension, and, for a few, a grim sense of satisfaction. "You can't be serious," Caroline shrieked, her voice cracking. The carefully constructed facade of the sophisticated, victimized woman was crumbling, revealing the raw panic beneath. "It was a simple mix-up. I was flustered. You can't kick me off the flight for that." The station manager, a man named Mr. Davies, emerged from his tense discussion with the captain. His face was a thundercloud. He had just gotten off the phone with Robert Chen, the EVP, and the tongue-lashing he'd received had been legendary. His career was flashing before his eyes. "Ma'am," Davies said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Your mix-up has resulted in a Category 3 operational halt. You made a false, slanderous accusation against another passenger, causing his wrongful removal and leading to the grounding of this aircraft by airline executive order. Your presence on this flight is no longer tenable. Please collect your things now." The mention of an executive order sent a fresh wave of shock through the cabin. This wasn't a standard procedure. This was an intervention from the highest levels. Who was this kid? Caroline looked at Jordan, her eyes wild with a mixture of hatred and dawning terror. The boy in the hoodie was no simple target. He was something else entirely. She had kicked a hornet's nest, and the entire swarm was now descending upon her. "This is outrageous. I am a Platinum Medallion member. I will sue. I will sue this entire airline," she blustered. But the threats were hollow. She was losing, and she knew it. "You are welcome to pursue any legal action you see fit," Davies said coldly. "In the meantime, the Port Authority officers on the jet bridge would like a word with you regarding the filing of a false report." That was the final blow. Police. This had escalated beyond a travel inconvenience into a criminal matter. The color drained completely from her face, leaving her looking pale and old. Wordlessly, she began to shove her belongings into her tote bag, her movements clumsy and frantic. Her composure was gone, replaced by the jerky motions of a cornered animal. Brenda, the flight attendant who had been so quick to placate Caroline, stood frozen near the galley. Her face was ashen. She watched as Caroline was being formally removed, and she could feel the icy fingers of dread creeping up her own spine. She had been a key player in this. She had taken the woman's side without question. She had labeled Jordan aggressive. She had helped throw him off the plane. Captain Miller emerged from the galley. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The easy authority was gone, replaced by the grim visage of a man who had made a catastrophic professional misjudgment. His eyes found Jordan's. He walked down the aisle, every step heavy, and stopped in front of him. In front of the entire cabin, Captain Miller stood before Jordan Vance and spoke, his voice strained but clear. "Mr. Vance, on behalf of myself and the crew of Apex Air, I want to offer you my most profound and sincere apology. There is no excuse for what happened here. I failed in my duty to ensure the safety and respect of all my passengers equally. I listened to an unsubstantiated claim and acted on bias, not on fact. I was wrong, and I am deeply, truly sorry for the humiliation and distress we have caused you." It was a stunning moment, a captain, the quasi-deity of an aircraft, humbling himself before a 17-year-old boy. Jordan simply nodded, accepting the apology without a word. There was nothing to say. The apology couldn't erase what had happened, but it was a necessary first step. As a disgraced Caroline Finch was escorted down the aisle by Michael, she had to walk past Jordan. She refused to look at him, her eyes fixed on the floor, a picture of utter defeat. The cabin was silent, watching her go. As she stepped off the plane, the two Port Authority officers stepped forward to greet her. The door closed, and this time, the sound was one of finality. The station manager then turned his attention to Brenda. "Brenda," he said, his voice low but audible to those nearby. "You are to be replaced by a reserve attendant. Your conduct is under immediate review. You will deplane and report to my office. Do not leave the airport." Brenda's eyes welled up with tears. She nodded mutely, untying her silk scarf with trembling fingers. Her career, built over 15 years of service, was imploding because she had chosen to believe a liar over an innocent boy. The chaos on the plane began to subside, replaced by an awestruck quiet. The other passengers now looked at Jordan with a new kind of curiosity, tinged with respect and a little bit of fear. Who was he? The son of a politician? A celebrity? Sarah, the journalist in seat 3A, finally spoke. She leaned across the aisle. "That was one of the most disgraceful and yet most satisfying things I have ever witnessed," she said quietly to Jordan. "I'm a reporter for ProPublica. I saw the whole thing. If you need a witness, or if you just want to talk, here's my card." She passed him a simple white business card. Jordan took it. "Thank you," he said, his voice still. "I appreciate that." A new flight attendant, professional and courteous, came to take Brenda's place. The station manager made a final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the extended delay. We will be underway shortly. To compensate for the inconvenience, all in-flight services, including Wi-Fi and premium beverages in all cabins, will be complimentary. We thank you for your patience." As the ground crew began to finally prepare for a real pushback, Jordan settled back into seat 2B. The leather felt the same, but everything was different. The air was thick with the ghost of the drama. He had his seat back. He had his apology. But the innocence of this trip was gone, replaced by a harsh lesson in the realities of the world. He looked out the window as the plane finally began to move. He pulled out his phone and sent a simple text to his dad, "I'm back on. Thank you." The reply came back instantly, "Justice is not a privilege, son. It's a non-negotiable term. I love you. Have a great time in London." Jordan closed his eyes. The plane was taking off, but the real storm, the hard karma he had set in motion, was just beginning to make landfall for those left behind on the ground. The wheels of Apex Air Flight 718 lifted off the tarmac at JFK, leaving a maelstrom of consequences in its wake. For Jordan, soaring at 35,000 feet, there was a sense of grim resolution. But for Caroline Finch and Brenda, the free fall was just beginning. Karma, when delivered from the 58th floor, is not a gentle nudge. It's a wrecking ball. Caroline Finch was not arrested at the gate. Marcus Vance was more strategic than that. The Port Authority officers took a detailed statement from her, from the station manager, Mr. Davies, and from the purser, Michael. Her honest mistake was now a formal incident report documenting a false accusation that had grounded a commercial airliner. She was informed that Apex Air, and potentially another party, would be pressing charges. Shaken and stripped of her public dignity, she was released and told not to leave the state. Her first call was to her husband, a real estate developer. She spun a story of being misunderstood, of an overzealous airline, of a thuggish young man who had intimidated her. But her narrative began to unravel when her husband's initial sympathy turned to cold dread. "Caroline, what was the name of the boy?" he asked. "Vance. Jordan Vance." "Why?" Her husband was silent for a long moment. "Caroline," he said, his voice strained. "My new high-rise project in Hudson Yards, the primary investor, the one putting up 70% of the capital, is a private equity firm. The firm is a subsidiary of Orosphere Dynamics. The man I've been meeting with, the one who holds our entire financial future in his hands, his name is Marcus Vance." The phone nearly slipped from Caroline's trembling hand. It wasn't just a random act of prejudice. She had, in a spectacular display of cosmic misfortune, targeted the son of the man who held her family's financial destiny in the palm of his hand. The next morning, her husband's phone rang. It was Marcus Vance's office. The meeting to finalize the next stage of funding was cancelled. The entire deal was under review. Within a week, Orosphere's equity firm formally pulled out, citing a material breach of character and reputational risk associated with the project's partners. The entire multi-million-dollar development collapsed, taking her husband's company with it and plunging them into catastrophic bankruptcy. But Marcus Vance's retribution was a multi-pronged attack. The story needed to be public. His legal team contacted Sarah, the ProPublica journalist. They didn't offer her money. They offered her something far more valuable: confirmation and on-the-record quotes. Sarah, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, didn't need much encouragement. She had witnessed the injustice firsthand. Her article, titled "Privilege, Prejudice, and Power at 30,000 Feet," was a masterpiece of narrative journalism. It detailed the incident in excruciating detail, naming Caroline Finch and flight attendant Brenda. It highlighted the systemic biases at play but pivoted to the incredible story of the aftermath, the grounding, the apology, and the identity of the boy's father. The story didn't name Marcus Vance as the architect of the grounding, but simply as the CEO of Orosphere Dynamics, a major Apex Air client, adding a layer of compelling corporate intrigue. The article went viral. Caroline Finch became an instant pariah. Her name and face were everywhere, the new personification of entitled racism. Her country club membership was revoked. Friends stopped answering her calls. The charity she sat on the boards of asked for her immediate resignation. Her self-made interior design business, which thrived on word-of-mouth referrals from the wealthy elite, dried up overnight. No one wanted the plain Karen designing their living room. She was socially and financially ruined, trapped in a prison of her own making. For Brenda, the flight attendant, the karma was just as swift. The internal review at Apex Air was brutal. With the station manager's testimony, Michael's account, and the threat of the Vance lawsuit looming, the airline had no choice but to make an example of her. They reviewed her service record and found 2 prior complaints of rudeness, which had previously been dismissed. Now they were seen as a pattern. She was fired for gross misconduct, for violating company policy on non-discrimination, and for her role in escalating a situation that cost the airline nearly $500,000 and immeasurable reputational damage. She lost her job, her pension, and her flight benefits. At 45, with a specialized and now tarnished resume, her career in the aviation industry was over. The union couldn't protect her. Her actions were too flagrant, the company's exposure too great. She had made a choice in that moment to appease the loud, wealthy woman instead of protecting the quiet young black man. And it had cost her everything. Captain Miller was suspended for 2 months without pay and forced to attend a series of intensive diversity, equity, and inclusion training seminars. A formal reprimand was placed on his permanent record, effectively ending any chance of promotion to the fleet management positions he had been aspiring to. He kept his job, but his authority and reputation were forever diminished among his colleagues. He was the captain who had been overruled by a phone call, the man who had to apologize to a teenager on his own plane. Apex Air itself took a massive hit. The ProPublica article was a PR nightmare. Their stock dipped. In a frantic damage control effort, Robert Chen, the EVP, publicly announced a complete overhaul of their customer service and conflict resolution training. And the company they hired to design and implement the new multi-million-dollar program? A leading DEI consulting firm, highly recommended by and with close ties to Orosphere Dynamics. Marcus Vance didn't just get justice. He turned his son's humiliation into a teachable moment, funded by the very corporation that had wronged him. He had forced them to pay for their own redemption. The hard karma wasn't just about punishment. It was about a complete and total realignment of a universe that had been knocked off its axis. Caroline Finch had believed her privilege was a shield. She, Brenda, and Captain Miller discovered, in the most brutal way possible, that sometimes you target the wrong person, and that shield turns out to be made of glass. Jordan's week in London was transformative, but not in the way he had expected. He walked through the halls of the Tate Modern and the Design Museum, saw groundbreaking exhibits, and listened to lectures from his heroes. But underlying it all was the quiet hum of what had happened on Flight 718. The incident had changed something in him. It had stripped away a layer of youthful naivety and replaced it with a harder, more complex understanding of the world. He didn't obsess over it. He sketched, he learned, he absorbed the creative energy of the city. But he found himself observing people differently, noticing the subtle power dynamics, the unspoken biases in a glance or a turn of phrase. The event had been a crucible, and he had emerged from it forged into something stronger, more aware. The flight home was on a different Apex airplane, but the experience was a world apart. As he stepped on board, the gate agent greeted him with a deference that was almost uncomfortable. "Welcome, Mr. Vance. We are honored to have you with us today." He was in seat 2B again. The flight attendants treated him like royalty. The captain came out before takeoff to personally welcome him aboard and assure him of a pleasant flight. It wasn't the anonymity he preferred, but he understood it for what it was, the ripple effect of his father's power. It was a stark reminder that his treatment on the flight out had nothing to do with him personally and everything to do with perception. Now they didn't see a potential troublemaker in a hoodie. They saw the son of Marcus Vance, a symbol of immense corporate influence. He declined the champagne, ordered a ginger ale, and spent the flight refining the design for his cantilevered chair. The lines were smoother now, more confident. He had solved the physics problem, finding a way to balance grace with structural integrity. It felt like a metaphor for his own recent experience. When he landed at JFK, his father was there to meet him, standing just beyond the customs exit. It was a rare gesture, as Marcus was usually swamped with work. They didn't speak much at first. Marcus just pulled him into a firm hug. "How was London?" his father asked as they walked to the car. "Incredible," Jordan said. "The festival was amazing." "And the flight?" Jordan paused. They were very attentive. Marcus nodded, a grim understanding in his eyes. In the car, a sleek black Audi, Marcus finally spoke about the aftermath. He told Jordan, in simple, direct terms, what had happened to Caroline Finch's husband's company, about the ProPublica article, about Brenda's dismissal, and the new training program at Apex. He didn't say it with pride or relish, but with a sense of grim necessity. "What they did was not just an insult to you, Jordan," Marcus said, looking over at his son. "It was a failure of a system. Sometimes, to fix a faulty system, you have to give it a shock, a powerful one. What Caroline Finch did came from a place of arrogance and prejudice. She assumed she had all the power in that situation. She was wrong. The only thing that counters that kind of power is a stronger one, used to enforce accountability." Jordan was silent for a long time, watching the city lights flash by. "I didn't want her life to be ruined," he said quietly. "Her life wasn't ruined by me," Marcus corrected gently. "It was ruined by her, by the choices she made. I simply made sure the invoice for those choices was delivered to the right address. You will encounter people like her your entire life, son. They will try to put you in a box, to define you by their own limited, ugly view of the world. You must never let them. Your dignity is your own. you carry it inside you. But when someone tries to steal it, you must be prepared to defend it with everything you have. Jordan looked at his father, the CEO, the titan of industry, and for the first time, he fully understood the weight of the power he wielded. He had used it not for revenge, but for a harsh, corrective form of justice. A few months later, Jordan received his acceptance letter from the Pratt Institute School of Design. Tucked into the acceptance package was a handwritten note from the dean, who mentioned he had seen Jordan's portfolio submission and was particularly impressed by an innovative cantilevered chair design. The journey that began with a moment of profound ugliness had ended in triumph. The incident on Flight 718 became a part of his story, a scar that reminded him not of the wound, but of the fact that he had healed and become stronger. He would walk into the world of design and into his own future, not just as the son of Marcus Vance, but as a young man who had faced down prejudice and had learned, in the most dramatic way possible, that a quiet voice, when backed by unshakable truth and a little bit of power, can be loud enough to ground an airplane and shake the very foundations of the world. Thank you for watching this story of injustice and the incredible power of karma, brought to you by Dark Stories. What happened to Jordan Vance on Flight 718 is a shocking reminder of how quickly prejudice can escalate. He was judged, accused, and dismissed in a matter of minutes. But the story didn't end there. It shows us that when you stand up for the truth, and when accountability is demanded, the consequences can be just as swift and powerful. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about rebalancing the scales, proving that character is more important than status and that integrity is the ultimate authority. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in standing up to prejudice and fighting for justice, please help us share it. Hit that like button, share this video with your friends and family, and most importantly, subscribe to Dark Stories for more powerful stories like this one. Your support helps us continue to bring these important narratives to light. Thank you for being a part of our community.